What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action, and we've got UFC Jacksonville on deck this weekend, featuring a featherweight main event between two violent finishers at the weight class. Josh Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. Should be a star-studded main event for as long as that one lasts, scheduled for 5 rounds if we need them. But we've got 14 fights on this card. There was a lot of fight footage and just stats and research to get through to make the research for this week. So excuse me for getting this video out a little bit later than I usually do in the week. But with so many debuting fighters, short-notice fighters, and fighters that aren't debuting, but it's only their second or third time in the UFC octagon, it was just a lot of stuff to get through. And honestly, I was baffled by a lot of the money lines this week. I've got clear opinions of who's going to win these fights, but the money lines were either just way too wide than I expected, or just the bet just didn't make sense. So I'll be looking to attack this card from a prop perspective in some cases here. I do have about 4 or 5 money line bets I'll touch on in this video. And I'll try to be as brief as I can with so many fights on this card. But it is a good fight night card. And I'll be back tomorrow night, Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Central Time on this channel for my live stream, where I'll talk to you guys in the chat. We'll break down the fights again. And I'll be having Chronic Combat Conversations, TB, and Guru as my guests this week. So it should be a lot of fun. Awesome guys to break down fights with. They know their stuff. They're passionate about the sport. So hit the like, hit the subscribe. Join me tomorrow for that show. And check out the description for my affiliate link to Bet Online, which is the sportsbook betting partner of this channel, Addicted to Combat. So it's one of my favorite ones that I personally use. They have awesome lines on mixed martial arts. They drop their props some of the soonest in the game. And if you use that link, you can directly help out the channel. If you sign up, you'll get that welcome bonus of 50%. For your first deposit. So check that out in the description. Again, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let's keep the channel growing. And let's break into the first fight of the night. First fight of the prelims. We've got a middleweight bout between Dumas and Cody Brundage. And I guess this is a hometown bout for Rodrigues because he is from the Florida area. This fight card being in Jacksonville. So maybe that'll power him up to get his first UFC win, since he dropped the ball in his debut a few months ago against Josh Fremd. Dumas is a kickboxer. Cody Brundage more of a wrestle boxer type. So both guys are pretty aggressive, and Brundage is filling in on short notice for this fight, and he's in desperate need of a win coming off of back-to-back losses. So starting with the Dumas side, he is now 7-1 as a pro. He came into the Contender Series 6-0, scored a very easy round-1 guillotine over a fellow kickboxer, and just showing that Dumas does have a very good physique for the weight class. He's very thin, long, and rangy, with a 79-inch reach and 6'2", only 27 years old. Very good, potential for a guy who's pretty athletic and fast. He's got great kicks and long linear punches, and he's super aggressive, but that's always a recipe for disaster when you've got kind of a lackluster resume pre-Dana White Contender Series, just pretty much scraping up bums and never really facing true adversity in a fight. So he came in there against Josh Fremd, so I picked against him in that bout because Fremd, even though he's not the most physically gifted or talented guy, very good grappler who's had a lot of good experience. He took down Dumas, avoided the heavy strikes early, and basically broke him by the end of round 1. And in round 2, it was an easy choke to get Dumas to tap rather quickly. So coming into his second spot now, Dumas, he does have an opponent he could probably knock out. Cody Brundage does not have the best durability, just based on what I've seen so far. Getting hurt by Dulchalum Gimbula pretty early in that fight before coming back with a guillotine victory. Cody Brundage also got knocked out very quickly to Mikhail Oleksiejczuk a few fights ago. Some pretty simple hammer fists and ground strikes knocked him out cold. So Cody Brundage is not the oldest guy going either. He's 29 years old, pretty much in his prime here as a wrestler with a collegiate background and heavy hands himself. So he's a kill or be killed fighter, though, which is why this should be pretty violent. Most of Cody's victories and defeats have ended under 1.5 rounds, including his last 4 fights, 2 losses and 2 victories, all ended under 1.5 rounds. So the guy is either going to knock out his opponent early, like a guy like Tresean Gore, or he's going to get knocked out himself or submitted like he did against Rodolfo Vieira in his last fight. So I think this is a pretty clear path to victory for Cody Brundage. If he can just avoid getting knocked out early, he can take down Dumas just like Josh Fremd did in his last fight, and he can probably rain down ground strikes and expose a submission, because Cody Brundage does have a good guillotine and a nice strong arm triangle choke as well. So that's the route I'm going to go with this. Probably a round one submission for Cody Brundage, but either way, I don't see this going, past the 1.5 round mark. So right now, the money line is at minus 175 for Cody Brundage, plus 150 for Rodrigues Dumas. I think that's a little bit of an overcorrection since Dumas was a heavy favorite last time. The guy is still dangerous and very physically gifted, and Brundage still is not that trustworthy. But I did take a bet on Cody Brundage a few days ago on the weekend. It was at minus 130 for Brundage on the money line. I put just 1.3 units to win one. I think he's got the simpler game plan. Like I said, probably a round one submission for Brundage. We've got a super high-level fight up next at 125, flyweight bout between two young prospects. We've got the Japanese Tatsuro Taira facing Brazil's Clayton Rodrigues. And Tatsuro Taira, he's currently 3-0 in the UFC and 13-0 as a professional. He's only 23 years old. He's a very high-level grappler, very young and high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And he's got good enough takedowns to get the fight to the mat where he is dangerous. And he's got serviceable enough striking. It's always going to be a work in progress for him, but it's good enough to maintain safety, maintain distance, and give him enough time to look for the takedown entry. Currently, minus 300 for Tatsuro Taira, but that's come all the way down to minus 235 on Taira's money line on BetOnline. Clayton Rodrigues, we're looking at some books had him all the way up at plus 250 as an underdog. He's currently plus 200 on BetOnline. And that seems a lot more appropriate. I think this should be a lot closer. You're always inherently going to have a higher juiced money line when you've got an undefeated prospect that we've never seen lose before statistically. So you're always going to have a little bit more of a favorite price tag there. But as long as this stays standing, Clayton Rodrigues certainly has the striking edge. He's got very slick Muay Thai, good explosive athletic maneuvers, flying knees, spinning back kicks. Everything is very accurate. A nice, really quick high kick. And we just saw him come in as a big favorite over Shannon Ross last time, and he got a less than 1 minute knockout over Shannon Ross very quickly, ripping to the body and finishing him off against the cage with strikes. But same for Tatsuro Taira. He had a very, pretty easy opponent. He was a minus 1250 against Jesus Aguilar, and Tatsuro Taira made him look like that with a very quick round one triangle submission. So the common opponent between these two guys is actually a guy who beat Clayton Rodrigues by a controversial split decision in his debut. That was CJ Vergara, whereas it took only 2 rounds for CJ Vergara to get submitted by Tatsuro Taira. But Vergara is a very tough opponent for a striker. He's durable, and he presses his opponents backwards, So Clayton Rodrigues, pretty good grappler in his own right. He's got a solid takedown ability offensively. A good BJJ game on the mat, but being tested against somebody like Taira, I just don't think he's going to hold up for very long if it stays on the mat. So I'm going to favor the favorite in this matchup. I'm going to go with Tatsuro Taira to go 14-0. I just think he's got serviceable enough striking, a good enough fight IQ to get this fight to the mat quickly, and I think he could wear out the gas tank of Clayton by holding him in position, making him defend submissions for as long as it lasts. Even if he doesn't get the submission, he could wear out the power and the explosivity of Rodrigues. And that's the thing with Rodrigues. He's so explosive. All of these high caliber, high octane moves like flying knees and spinning attacks, that could help end his night by knockout, but it could also more likely get him taken down and controlled on the mat even quicker. So give me Tatsuro Taira. I'm glad that this money line came down to minus 235. That might even be worth either parlaying him up with somebody else or just taking that straight on the money line. But I do like the under 2.5 at minus 150. Not a bad way to play this. Maybe props are the way to go. But give me Tatsuro Taira by a late submission in this fight. Featherweight bout up next between Jack Jenkins and Jamal Emmers. This is one of these guys in Jack Jenkins where he made his debut earlier this year in his home country in February at UFC 284. Had a victory over Don Shanis by decision. Pretty easy debut spot there for him. But now he comes in against a true UFC-level competitor in Jamal Emmers. So Jack Jenkins, 30 years old as a prospect, 11-2. Pretty hyped guy coming from the Australian regional scene, and he's a well-rounded fighter. Good volume, good cardio, very good toughness, and he can mix in devastating leg kicks, body strikes, and then mix in level changes to take you down and rain down ground and pound as well. So 5 knockouts, 3 submissions, 3-0 in his decision records for Jack Jenkins, who's the plus 180 underdog in this spot. Jamal Emmers is the minus 210 favorite. And I think he's a rightful favorite here because the guy has fought nothing but UFC-level competition even before he made his walk to the UFC for the first time. In the LFA, he fought Corey Sandhagen to a victory by decision. He had fought Thiago Moises to a loss before, Alexander Hernandez, early in his career. So it's always guys that are, right on the level of going to be UFC competition. And Jamal Emmers fits right in. He's very big for the weight class at 5'10". Only 33 years old at this point. He is 2-2 in the UFC, and he's a wrestler himself. Good offensive takedowns, very athletic, a slick mover with good footwork, and he can strike and keep you at bay, and then counter strike and then switch levels and take you down. And he's got a decent submission game as well. I've seen him hit some arm triangle chokes, pre-UFC, I believe, in the LFA. But, and he was even attacking submissions against his last opponent, Hussein Ashkabov, who was a debuting 23-0 undefeated European grappler. And Jamal Emmers able to stuff all the takedowns, wear out his gas tank, and then land some grappling of his own at the end for a unanimous decision victory. So Jamal Emmers was a slight dog in making his return after a long layoff. So I think people were reminded of who he is. He's now a sizable favorite, and I agree with this money line being where it is. I got Jamal Emmers slightly cheaper at minus 195. I put a couple units on him to win this fight. I think he can just show he's a step above Jack Jenkins, who was, going back and forth in the grappling with Don Shainis, allowing some top position time for Don Shainis. I think you should really be finishing a guy like Don Shainis if you're going to be facing Jamal Emmers in your next fight. But the way this could go poorly for Jamal Emmers is he could get his legs kind of kicked off early. Jack Jenkins does have very damaging leg kicks and calf kicks specifically to limit movement of his opponents early. And Jack Jenkins has good cardio, and he's got very good forward pressure and volume. If Jamal Emmers starts slow or just has an off night early on in this fight, he could fall behind on the scorecards and lose this fight by decision. But I'm going to go with Emmers here. I just think he's a step above, and I think he truly is UFC caliber and just a very talented athlete here. So Emmers, I'm going to call it by decision. Lightweight bout up next between Trevor Peek and Jose Chepe Mariscal. And Chepe Mariscal making his official UFC debut on short notice in this lightweight bout. And he kind of deserves this spot, though, because Mariscal has crossed paths with a lot of UFC fighters. He's got notable wins over Pat Sabatini and Yusuf Zalal, and he does have losses to Joe Anderson Brito, Steve Garcia, Sean Soriano, and I think I'm forgetting one, Bryce Mitchell as well. So not that great to have that many losses on your record. He is 13-6, but at 30 years old, the guy has at least lost to UFC-level talent he's been testing himself against. And on paper, it's a guy that you would love to back against Trevor Peek. Trevor Peek is just nothing but a brawler. Occasionally, he does have takedown threat just off of his aggression and his level change ability, but he's pretty much leaving nothing for a round 2 in his strikes. He puts 100% effort into all of his fight-ending haymakers, vicious hooks, standing hammer fists. You saw him end his last opponent with an Eric Gonzalez in round 1. And the guy's got 8 wins, 0 losses. 6 of those are, round 1 knockouts. The other 2 are round 2 knockouts. So he came into a bit of stardom last season of the Contender Series, where he fought Malik Lewis and got dropped pretty hard. I mean, his chin was up in the air to be countered. Malik Lewis did just that. Followed it up with some knees and some kicks. And Trevor Peek did not go down. He got on wobbly legs, clearly almost unconscious on his feet. But he came through, and I think he saved himself with a takedown or 2, made it to round 2, and then over a gassed-out Malik Lewis, he scored the ground-and-pound knockout. So, Trevor Peek with a comeback victory, everybody loves to see that. Super entertaining and seems like a nice guy, but with his lack of technical striking, his lack of defense, and his lack of pacing or even takedown defense, it just makes it hard to back the guy, especially at chalk odds. Like, if I'm going to back him, I want to back him against somebody who's got durability issues, somebody who also engages in reckless brawls and I want to bet Trevor Peek as an underdog. So he opened as a minus 200 favorite over Chepe Mariscal. It's now moved all the way down to a pick'em, so 50-50, minus 110 for each guy. And on paper, at 30 years old, Chepe Mariscal, I mean, I mentioned the good experience, but he does have a lot of good skills. He's got pretty good grappling. He's got slick Muay Thai, and he's got a pretty well-rounded background. But the guy, and he's on the 3-fight win streak. I should probably mention that, all by finish, by stoppage due to strikes. But all that considered, Jose Mariscal does fail in his durability check. He's been in trouble in a lot of fights, knocked out 3 times. Even Steve Garcia had him on in all sorts of trouble for as long as that fight lasted. I think it was like a round and a half. Ended prematurely, but still, he was in serious trouble with the strikes. I think he got dropped within a few seconds of the match even starting. So the durability is a concern, and of course, when Chepe Mariscal does land flush, he can get really aggressive and get into a firefight. So I don't want that against Trevor Peek. So even though he's got all of the textbook technical advantages for Mariscal over Trevor Peek, I still think the eye test tells me that Trevor Peek will be the more durable guy when it gets into a firefight, and I think Trevor Peek gets another round 1 knockout here. So I'm not going to bet Trevor Peek unless I could get him at plus money. It's just too much to ask to pay chalk in this guy with as many problems as he has, but maybe there's a prop. I think him winning by knockout is like plus 135 or something. Probably round 1 is around plus 250 at this point, so maybe something like that could be a way to play this, but overall, give me Trevor Peek, round 1 knockout as a pick. Flyweight bout up next between Zhumagulov and Joshua Van, and this is, I believe, the 3rd opponent that they're trying to give Zhumagulov in this past month, so this guy's continued to have bad luck in matchups, and he's had bad luck in the UFC with his decision results. Of course, we've spoken about him several times recently. Zalgas is currently 34 years old. He is 1-5 in the UFC. But like I've mentioned, there's been a few bouts that I could probably give his way. They were competitive ones. The one against Raulian Paiva, the one against Charles Johnson at the end of last year, and of course the one against Jeff Molina. All were very close bouts for Zhumagulov, who has a very good wrestling game plan. He's got good striking, blitzing in combination, getting in range, trying to get back out of range. Sometimes he can get tagged up before he does leave range, and the striking numbers are often close, which leads to these close split decisions going either man's way, either him or his opponent. But the guy is 6-6 in decisions, completely 50-50 in that regard. 7 knockouts and only 1 submission for Zhumagulov. But the guy's, he's been facing high-level competition so far. Joshua Van, who he's facing this weekend, making his debut in the UFC, only 21 years old for the striker Josh Van, whose entire MMA game is a work in progress. The guy only turned pro a few years ago, and he's had his entire career in the Fury FC. So you can watch most of that on UFC Fight Pass. His 4 amateur bouts, I believe he went 4-0, and now his 8 pro bouts where he's gone 7-1. So his striking is what he's most naturally gifted at. Very fast hands, good technical boxing, and a good mix of brawling and being aggressive, whichever direction the fight goes. But his submission game is certainly a work in progress. I did see him, I think, in his last fight, he scored a rear naked choke from a standing back take. But it took him a long time to even lock in and figure out how to put pressure on the neck of his opponent. So luckily the guy was, low level enough and kind of exhausted that he couldn't fight the hands off that well. And Josh Van got the tap. But it took something that most guys in the UFC level would slap in 10 seconds or less. It took him a half of a minute to do. So, Josh Van, he's a guy who also his one loss, he did get taken down by a better wrestler pretty easily on repeat, and then rear naked choked himself. So you can see he's getting more and more better scramble ability to get back up to his feet, but I don't see that happening against Zhumagulov, who is just so many levels above him in experience and skill set. So got to go with Zalgas here. I will say at minus 200 as the favorite here, Josh Van at plus 170. Man, I there's something about Josh Van. I just feel like this guy is just a naturally talented and improving young man. So I like him. I think he's going to be a good addition to the UFC if they keep him around. He's exciting. But I'll pick Zhalgas to win here, probably by decision, hopefully a dominant one. He can clearly win and get Zhalgas back on track, but probably going to stay away from this one from a betting perspective unless there's some fat line on like Zhalgas by submission or something. So, give me Zhalgas to win the fight. Women's strawweight bout up next between Tabitha Ricci and Jillian Robertson. Two fan favorites here and a grappler versus grappler matchup at 115. This is going to be Jillian Robertson's second appearance at the new weight class since she dropped down from 125, where she spent the first, I believe, 13 fights of her career. So she's gone 9-5 in the entire league so far since 2017. She's been very active, and she's only 28 years old, which is crazy to have that much experience over such a wide array of high-level opponents in comparison to Tabitha Ricci, who I think is 3 months older than Jillian Robertson, but she's only 3-1 in the UFC. And that one loss came at her debut on short notice, up a weight class against Manon Fiorot. We could pretty much forgive that one. But that being said, 8-1 as a pro for Tabitha Ricci. She is a high-level BJJ black belt, just like Jillian Robertson, but Ricci also has that judo black belt and the ability to get hip throws and tosses to get her opponents to the mat. She does have a good single-leg takedown as well, and she's a pretty explosive striker in her own right for as small as she is at 5'1". She's got a good jab cross, a good jab overhand right, and she's got good footwork to get in and out of range pretty quickly. So when we're looking at two grapplers, I'll look at who's the better striker. Even with all of the experience for Jillian Robertson, I would give the striking edge to Tabitha Ricci if it stayed strictly a striking match. Now, the wrestling advantage I would have to give to Robertson, just because I don't care who's technically better, skill for skill, but just the effectiveness of getting opponents to the mat on the regular. That's Jillian Robertson, and she's done that against grapplers, she's done that against non-grapplers, and it's all been up a weight class against bigger opponents. She is able to land those takedowns. The only people that have ever controlled her for long periods of time have been, I think, Taila Santos and Miranda Maverick, maybe one other high-level opponent, but not many people are controlling Robertson either. So wrestling advantage I would give to Robertson, and the BJJ advantage I would give to her as well. Again, I don't care who's technically better or the higher rank of BJJ here. It's just, Jillian Robertson, quite frankly, she's been more effective again. She has the record for most submissions in the division, 9 submissions out of her 12 wins, and she has, I think, like 7 in the UFC in the women's divisions. I think that is a record. So, pretty good at being off her back or in dominant position here, and I think she's going to be able to out-wrestle Ricci, who's going to be smaller than her, end up in a dominant position and, ride out that control time, looking for submissions. So she could either win this by decision, which is usually not her MO for Jillian Robertson, or she could find that sub over Tabitha Ricci. I'm not really partial to a side since this is a pretty close matchup here, grappler versus grappler. Jillian Robertson's the plus 110 underdog, so I'll take that side as a pick here. Betting-wise, I'm not sure if I'm going to get there from any angle on this one, but I do like Robertson's experience, her size, and again, she's just been super effective with this type of game plan. So going back to Tabitha Ricci, again, she's got takedowns over her opponents so far, all 3 of her victories, but it was Maria Oliveira by decision, who does not have a ground game. Poliana Viana, who loves the arm bars, loves to be off of her back. She'll accept that. And then most recently against Jessica Penne, she scored a round 2 submission over Penne, who I believe is like 40 years old. Again, likes to be off of her back. So not very good takedown defense there. So, Ricci does have the skills, but she's not had the level of expertise compared to that of Jillian Robertson. So I think this is a pretty lateral step, or maybe even a step down for Robertson. So I'll take her as a dog to win this fight. Lightweight bout up next between two wrestlers. We've got Mateusz Rebecki from Poland, and we've got the Tajik fighter in Loic Radzhabov. Both guys have already made their debut in the UFC. This will be their second appearance after being successful in probably a matchup that they were expected to do a little bit better in their debuts for each of them. Where Mateusz Rebecki in January fought a short notice replacement in Nick Fiore, a jiu-jitsu fighter who's not the greatest of talent, but Rebecki came off the Contender Series, a shiny 16-1 record, a lot of finishes, and he bought his own hype. He tried to get a first-round knockout badly over Nick Fiore and gassed himself out when he couldn't put Fiore away. And then he had to kind of limp to the finish line in rounds 2 and rounds 3 with his effective and superior takedowns. So Coming back into his second fight here, he's going to be facing another opponent with kind of a similar game plan and skill set. Radzhabov is a guy who's got power in his hands. He's got a big, left and right hook, a big overhand right. We saw him in his debut at UFC 285 this year take on Esteban Ribas, who is a power-hitting Argentinian fighter off the regional scene in his debut. And I think Radzhabov dropped him within the first 10 seconds of round one. He scored about 11 takedowns out of maybe 20 attempts or so. And again, he kind of ran himself out of gas, thinking he probably should have finished the debuting fighter at that point. But Ribas, I think, made his way to his first decision result in his career, and it was his first loss in his career as well. So you got to hand it to Radzhabov for that on short notice. But still, both guys really had to dig deep and not gas out in their fight. So they're both durable. They both have they kind of utilize the same techniques, right? Like vicious hooks up close. I would say Rebecki is more of a diverse striker as far as targeting the body and things like that. But I think both guys are about equally as powerful. As far as the submission and wrestling game, I would edge that towards Radzhabov. I think he's at a higher level of. I know he's at a higher level of competition, and also the way that he sets up his submissions. Against a little bit more of a battle-tested level of competition, whereas Rebecki, it's a lot of heel hooks and arm bars on his record in some God knows where promotion way back in the day. So Radzhabov is a guy that we've seen in the PFL in the finale fight for 5 rounds twice now. He lost both of those in 2019 and 2021, but we at least saw some good qualities from that. And now he comes into the UFC second fight here against a similarly skilled opponent. I think Rebecki is more of a fast starter, and Radzhabov can be more of a measured, slower starter and stretch out his pace over the course of a fight. So I expect him to be the superior fighter here, and he's at plus 130. So I'm going to put 1 unit on Radzhabov to win this fight. Not sure if he gets it done inside the distance. Both guys are finishers, but neither one has been finished so far. So give me Radzhabov to at least edge out a control time-based decision here. Welterweight bout up next between Randy Brown and Wellington Turman, and this is Turman's first time down at 170. He's moving from middleweight, where he spent the first part of his lackluster career so far. He's 3-4 in the UFC, coming off of the loss to Andre Petrosky, where he got out-wrestled in that grappler versus grappler matchup some time ago. That was back in November. So making a new change here, that's never really a good sign, but he is only 26 years old, so I guess there is always time to improve. But we've been saying that about this BJJ black belt submission fighter for some time. His striking, his Muay Thai is a decent base, but he's just not that athletic or fast. His hand speed isn't that great, defense not that great, and he's pretty chinny as well. He's been knocked out viciously twice in his career so far in the UFC. One was by Bruno Silva, you can forgive that one, but the other was to Andrew Sanchez. I mean, put him out equally just as cold. So the only wins that Turman has had, all 3 of those, are guys that are no longer in the league. An armbar victory off of his back against Misha Serkinov, released. Decision win over Sam Alvey, released. And Marcus Perez, I believe he beat as well. So that was a while back, and Marcus Perez long since released. So Turman tried to make a change for the better here at welterweight, but he's facing one of the more gifted guys physically for the division and one of the more experienced guys at this level. Randy Brown, 6'3" with a very long reach, 32 years old. He's had 15 fights in the UFC at this point, going 10-5 in those appearances, and all 5 of the losses are, pretty decent, notable names. Nico Price with those strange hammer fists knocked him out years ago. Vicente Luque, when he slowed down, hit him with a vicious knee. Those are the knockout losses, but he also has lost, again, most recently to Jack Della Maddalena. We'll get that one out of the way. It was a very quick round 1 club and sub. Jack Della is very talented. The next best thing going. He lost to Bilal Muhammad by decision a while back, and he also lost to Michael Graves, is the one I always forget. And Graves was a very good wrestler, but he was released due to, I think, criminal activity or something like that. Nothing performance-related. Again, we're going back in time quite a bit. But Randy Brown, slick kickboxer with solid grappling when he can use his size to employ that, using his height and reach to rock somebody and then cinch up a guillotine or a rear naked choke on them against the cage. He can do that, but his takedown defense is very good. His striking is long and keeps him safe at range. He can slap even right and left hooks pretty far out, and it just wraps right around your guard because he's got such long arms. So, Yeah, I mean, loose, relaxed, hands low. He'll bait you in for the pull counter and be pretty effective, always landing far more on his opponents than he gets hit in return. The direct opposite is true for Wellington Turman at this point. So unless Turman can get in close, bully Randy Brown against the cage for the majority of this fight, attempt to take his back or take him to the mat, and get a submission, I don't see him winning this fight. So give me Randy Brown pretty confidently here. Minus 220, the favorite for Randy Brown, plus 185 for Wellington Turman. I'd say the money line is about right. I think it could even be more in the favor of Randy Brown, if I'm being honest. At minus 214 on the money line, I put 3 units on Randy Brown to win. I think he can get this done either inside the distance or by decision. I wouldn't be surprised if he knocked out Wellington Turman here, but just give me Brown by decision as the pick. Another welterweight matchup next that I feel pretty confident in picking here. We've got Neil Magny, a very experienced veteran at the weight class, taking on more of a newcomer in Phil Rowe. Both guys pretty much have an equal tail of the tape besides their age, which isn't that far off in general. You know, you've got 6'3" for both guys. Both have an 80-inch reach. Just insane statistics for 170. And Neil Magny, 35. Phil Rowe, 32 years old. Obviously a lot more fight miles, but that comes with a lot more high-level experience for Neil Magny, who's had the most wins in the welterweight division, the most decision wins in the league, I believe, and he's also had the most time in the cage as a 170-pounder of all time at the weight class. So Neil Magny coming off of a round 1, very easy submission loss at the hands of Gilbert Burns. But that's Neil Magny's weakness, right? Neil Magny's a very good volume striker, well-rounded fighter. He can sneak in cage bullying, clinch attacks, and takedowns. But if you are a better grappler, a better wrestler, and have good submission offense, Neil Magny is your guy to beat because he's got, I think, 6 submission losses on his record. But kind of like what we were talking about with Randy Brown in the last welterweight fight, all of these losses are against pretty high-level competition. Gilbert Burns, title challenger. Who else? RDA also tapped out Neil Magny, former champion. Shavkat Rakhmonov, most 2 or 3 fights ago, took him down in round 2 and tapped him out. You know, a guy probably going to challenge for the belt at some point in the future. So combine all that with solid cardio for Neil Magny. He's a pretty good threat here. And Phil Rowe is a guy who has physical gifts at 170, just like Neil Magny. He's been using that, but it's always a comeback performance for Phil Rowe. He's a guy who, at this point, he is, 4-1 in the UFC at this point. I know he lost his bout against Gabe Green, got hurt early, and then lost the decision, getting out-wrestled. He also went back in there against, who am I thinking of? Jason Witt. He was in there against Ryan Koski. Both of those wrestlers took him down and controlled him in round 1, and they both got sniped off by his long strikes in round 2. So, I mean, that's always like the MO for Phil Rowe. It's going to be a rocky round 1. You probably want to live bet him after round 1 with a better line, and then he's going to get the job done in rounds 2 or rounds 3. And it took him until round 3 against Nico Price in his last fight at the end of last year. He got rocked against Nico Price in round 2. Came back and started pouring on volume on him and then got him out of there in round 3. So even still, it was a comeback performance even when Nico Price wasn't offensively wrestling him. So, I'm not sure where the ceiling of Phil Rowe really is. He's on a 3-fight win streak. They're all by knockout, but he also has a 100% finish rate. He's never won a decision in his career. He's got 6 knockouts and 4 submissions that make up his 10 victories. So, yeah, I mean, that's the complete opposite. That's a contrasting style to Neil Magny. So you've got Phil Rowe, who needs to finish the fight. You've got Neil Magny, who's notoriously durable and hard to finish. And Magny's a guy who wins decisions better than anybody else. And you've got Phil Rowe, who's never won one before. So I don't think Neil Magny is that over the hill just yet. I will say his durability has been getting cracked a little bit more recently. So that does worry me. But you got to look at who he's fighting, right? He got hurt against Daniel Rodrigues. He got hurt against maybe Max Griffin early last year. But he's edging out the victory over these guys still. So give me Neil Magny. He's currently a minus 160 favorite. Plus 140 can be had for Phil Rowe. I got Neil Magny for 2 units at minus 145 on BetOnline about a day or 2 ago. So that's what I'm rocking with this one. I really want to put more down on him, but 2 units, I'll limit it there just because of, like I said, that durability issue. Phil Rowe does have sniper-like accuracy with his strikes, but I think Neil Magny's going to keep it safe, play the bully in the clinch, and even score some takedowns here to get the decision nod once again. So give me Neil Magny to win. We've got a middleweight bout up next between Brendan Allen and Bruno Silva. Both guys are very good finishers in their area of expertise. You've got Brendan Allen, the high-level BJJ submission fighter, taking on Bruno Silva, the high-level and powerful kickboxer with unreal power for 185. So Brendan Allen, 12 submissions out of his 21 pro wins, and he also has 5 knockouts as well. His striking is always a work in progress at 27 years old. Bruno Silva, the Brazilian kickboxer, has got 23 professional wins. 20 of those have been by way of knockout. Like I said, almost heavyweight tier power at middleweight. So Brendan Allen is currently coming off of the biggest win of his pro career, a win over a fellow grappler in Andre Muniz. He just took all of Muniz's shine as probably the next best grappler at 185. That was supposed to be Andre Muniz, but Brendan Allen went toe-to-toe with him on the feet. 1 minute there, took him down to the mat, and was able to tap him out with just 35 seconds left in round 3 of the fight. So very good result there for Brendan Allen, moving him to a 4-fight winning streak. Bruno Silva just came back off of a round 1 knockout, back to his winning ways over Brad Tavares, and that snapped a 2-fight losing streak at the hands of Gerald Meerschaert by round 3 submission, and before that it was to Alex Pereira, former champion. So not bad losses there. I do think very highly of both of those guys that beat him, but overall, Brendan Allen just wants to take this fight to the mat as early as possible. That would be the most high IQ move. He does have good takedowns, and Bruno Silva, not the best takedown defense. He can be caught over swinging, headhunting for that round 1 knockout. And at that very moment, as early as possible, Brendan Allen does not want to be caught standing and striking with Bruno Silva, testing his new developing striking for very long. He will get knocked out. Even guys like Chris Curtis and Sean Strickland both are the 2 knockout losses on the record of Brendan Allen. So Chris Curtis, that makes sense. Sean Strickland, not the most powerful guy to be knocking people out. So there may be some durability issues inherently for Brendan Allen, who's got a very big head, a very big target for Bruno Silva to hit as well. So where the money line is at now, we're looking at minus 180 for Brendan Allen. We're looking at, plus 155 for Bruno Silva. I mean, it seems about right if you think about the clear path to victory for Allen, who could just take down Bruno Silva. Silva's been submitted 6 times out of his 8 losses, so it kind of makes sense that way. But I could even see Brendan Allen just racking up control time every round. Each round, the takedowns come easier and easier, and each round, Silva has got more blood in his arms and is not that dangerous to score that knockout. So just a grapple-heavy approach is what we're hoping for Brendan Allen. I'll pick him to win this fight, but I probably won't have my money on either side of this one. I could certainly see Bruno Silva knocking Brendan Allen out, but I think that would be early, whereas Brendan Allen could get the submission at any point in this fight. So the unders are interesting at least. I would say that the under 1.5 correlates towards Bruno Silva. The over 1.5 probably correlates to a Brendan Allen win based on control time, but the under 2.5, the alternate total, is at minus 190. Might not be a bad parlay piece. I certainly do see violence in this matchup either way. But, give me a Brendan Allen, we'll call it a round 2 submission win. Featherweight bout up next between David Onama and Gabriel Santos, 2 guys that are both very aggressive switch stance strikers. David Onama, of course, more of the pure kickboxer with fight-ending power, especially early in the fight. 10 wins, all 10 by way of stoppage. 100% finish rate for this guy that we haven't seen in about 10 months since he lost that decision to Nate Landwehr. Gabriel Santos is a guy we just saw make his debut on short notice against Lerone Murphy, and he made a very good account of himself, coming up just very short in a split decision controversial loss back in, I think that was March of this year. But he's more of a BJJ fighter than anything, but his striking is coming along very quickly at 26 years old. The former LFA featherweight champion is the Brazilian Gabriel Santos, and he's had some very good performances in the past year. He defeated Jose Delano for the title, the vacant belt, back in January by round 3 body strikes, TKO. Last November, I believe it was, he faced Mario Barbosa, again, early round 2 head kick. So this is coming from a guy who's primarily a grappler, and has pretty good takedown offense and submission know-how. But now his striking is coming along. It looked even better on that short notice debut spot against Lerone Murphy somehow. So a fight that he probably should have won. I had a lot of money on Lerone Murphy. I'm glad he didn't win that night, but he probably should have won that decision too. And when you consider that was his first fight outside of his home country in hostile territory against Lerone Murphy, and he looked better than he really did on tape. Very impressive stuff there from Santos. So neither man has been knocked out or submitted in their career so far, but they're both very aggressive and violent. So I could see this ending inside the distance, especially when you consider that David Onama is so front-loaded as a fighter. 8 of his 10 wins have ended under 1.5 rounds. And, he's kind of like round one, explosive finish or bust, in my opinion, at this point. Kind of one of these explosive, fast twitch type of fighters. So, the striking wise, like his striking always struck me as pretty impressive because of his finishes. That giant 15-punch combination against Gabriel Benitez a couple of years ago, but he was getting tagged before that. So his striking doesn't look that clean, especially defensively to me, the more I look into his tape. The money line does seem wide. It's minus 240 for Gabriel Santos, the Brazilian newcomer, and David Onama is the plus 205 underdog. I would say maybe more of like a minus 175, minus 180 Santos. I would like more, but I got to agree with the favorite being Gabriel Santos. I think he is the more well-rounded fighter, and I think he's a guy who can pace himself over 3 rounds much better and effectively. So I think the grappling and wrestling will go in his favor, especially after round 1 when Onama starts to tire. And as long as Santos can avoid getting knocked out early, I would say David Onama to this point does look more durable. But other than that, I would give a lot of the advantages in the fight to Santos. I'm going to take him to win this fight. I'm going to say either a round 2 or round 3 stoppage. Heavyweight bout up next between Justin Tafa and Austin Lane. We've got a battle between 2 different types of physiques at heavyweight, maxing out the weight class at 266. You've got the 29-year-old Australian Justin Tafa, who's 6 foot tall and looks more like a Mark Hunt trained fighter. Very good kickboxer, power, and kind of a slow, plotting, stalking type of game plan, trying to trap his opponents in a corner and then blitz them with a vicious combination to knock them out. He's currently 3-3 in the UFC as Justin Tafa, and he's coming off of back-to-back knockout wins over Harry Hunsucker and Parker Porter, the UFC's finest. So Austin Lane is also a striker, but more of a traditional boxer. He's 6'6", got a long reach, 35 years old, making his debut in the UFC off the Contender Series, where he actually weighed in at about 240 pounds in his last bout against who did he fight? Richard Jacoby, a Brazilian fighter who took him down, got reversed, and then got ground and pounded out by Austin Lane. But Austin Lane is a guy who was on the Contender Series years ago. He got knocked out by Greg Hardy pretty viciously. Gave Greg Hardy his entrance to the UFC. But Austin Lane had to go back to the regional scene and score, I think, 9 more professional bouts across the LFA, Fury FC, and some other low-level promotion. But he's been evolving his game. He's a guy who used to get taken down quite a bit by bigger fighters, held down, and have no answer for it. That won't be a problem in this matchup against a kickboxer, Justin Tafa, so that's good. But Austin Lane has actually, in his most previous bouts, he's been able to show some offensive wrestling himself and show that he's more dimensional than just a boxer. So out of his 12 wins, though, 11 knockouts, 1 submission. He's never been to the scorecards before. He's been knocked out in all 3 of Austin Lane's losses. So I'd say his weaknesses are his takedown defense. Doesn't have to worry about that against Justin Tafa. But his other weakness is his durability. He's been knocked out cold by not only Greg Hardy, but his follow-up fight against Frank Tate, knocked out cold by 1 punch. Out on the canvas snap, cold. And then he has 1 TKO loss to Vernon Lewis. Again, that was more of a TKO due to ground and pound after he got taken down. So Justin Tafa, he will expose the chin of Austin Lane. And I've seen Austin Lane face some pretty low-level southpaws, of which Justin Tafa fights out of that stance. And that gave Austin Lane a lot of trouble, was able to touch his chin pretty regularly. So Justin Tafa, minus 175 favorite at this point. Austin Lane, the plus 150 underdog. Yeah, sounds about right. For a match this low level, you kind of want it just to be like a coin toss. Like, there does seem like there is maybe some value in Austin Lane here, but I just think Tafa wins this fight. He lulls Austin Lane to sleep, thinks that he's safe and out of range, then Justin Tafa can close distance pretty quickly and trap you against the cage. He's got some pretty big uppercuts, some big head kicks, a nice straight southpaw left that closes the distance faster than people think it will. So yeah, I think that's going to be the story of this fight. Is there a world where Austin Lane shoots takedowns? Maybe. Is there a world where Austin Lane could just dance with his long reach and height on the outside and outpoint Justin Tafa the way that like a Jared Vanderaa did? Maybe, but when you think about Justin Tafa losing to Jared Vanderaa and Carlos Felipe, both of those guys are still, even though they're terrible, they're still durable. You know, you got to give that to Jared Vanderaa. The guy does eat a lot of big strikes and keep moving forward. So same with Carlos Felipe, and that's why Justin Tafa lost to those guys. I think if Austin Lane eats the same punches that Jared Vanderaa tasted from Justin Tafa, he'll get knocked out in round 1. So give me just that, Justin Tafa round 1 knockout. Women's flyweight bout in the co-main event of the Fight Night card. We've got Amanda Ribas taking on Maycee Barber. Two women with contrasting styles, but they both have similar records in the UFC at this point. The Brazilian Amanda Ribas, as a grappler, she's got a 6-2 record in the UFC at this point. Maycee Barber, coming from a karate background, but more of a striker and a somewhat of an aggressive brawler. She's 7-2 in the league at this point. And at only 25 years old for Maycee Barber, she's certainly been learning on the job and rounding out her game, improving year in and year out. She's got a karate background that she came in the league with, but she really made her bread and butter and stamped her name as a very good clinch fighter. You know, dirty boxing maneuvers in the clinch. She's very physical. She's more of a bully type of fighter. And not very technical striking, but it works because she plods forward aggressively, uses her toughness to eat punches, and eventually try to take her opponent to the mat where she's got vicious ground and pound. So there's been a few hiccups for Maycee Barber. She did lose to both Roxanne Modafferi, and she lost to Miranda Maverick. She probably should have lost to. She won that decision. She also lost to Alexa Grasso. So no shame there. But coming off of yet another controversial split decision result that she won, that many people thought that she lost, and that was to Andrea Lee last time out earlier this year in March. So Amanda Ribas, coming off of a very impressive performance against Viviane Araújo, who is a fellow, you know, more of an explosive technical striker than Amanda Ribas, but a fellow BJJ black belt. And Amanda Ribas was able to shut down her striking offense, you know, keep her kind of tentative to close range, get the takedown she needed to, and really dominate her in that matchup. I think she earned around somewhere around like 8 minutes of total control time over 3 rounds, and even had her in all sorts of trouble, maybe even knocked her down, I think, in round 2. So very impressive stuff for Ribas, 29 years old, coming from a judo and BJJ base, but her striking it is improving. She sticks a nice jab out there, looks for the big right cross or the big overhand right. It's not really the most technical. She's not the most confident when she's standing, but she just does look for those that ability to clinch up and get the judo throw to take you to the mat. And I think against Maycee Barber, she should be able to do just that, because Amanda Ribas was able to take down Caitlin Chookagian, Viviane Araújo. Both of those girls have way better takedown defense than Maycee Barber. And Maycee Barber was just taken down by Andrea Lee 5 times over the course of 3 rounds, a career best as far as takedown totals for Andrea Lee. So it's going to be the grappling and takedown success of Ribas, or is it going to be the aggressive brawling and forward pressure of Maycee Barber, getting the the hockey punching and the clinch and things like that going? I'm going to lean towards Amanda Ribas getting this done, but again, she's a -200 favorite. Maycee Barber, the +170 underdog. We know that Maycee Barber does have a knack for stealing these close decisions from the judges. So if they want to favor effective striking and the optics of an aggressive Maycee Barber, who's very physical, versus the control time and dominant mat positions of Amanda Ribas, I'm not sure I want to play that game. So I wouldn't be surprised if Maycee Barber pulls off this underdog stunt once again, but give me Amanda Ribas to have the better, clearer path to victory here. I think she does it by decision. Okay, we made it all the way to the main event of UFC Jacksonville. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into this potential 5-round bout at featherweight between the hard-hitting former interim title challenger Josh Emmett, as he welcomes Ilia Topuria to the big leagues, who's undefeated as a young grappler, 26 years old for Topuria, 13-0 record, 12 of 13 of those wins coming by way of finish. whereas Josh Emmett is 38 years old. He's a former collegiate wrestler, but one of these classic cases in mixed martial arts where you don't see him wrestle, even though that's his base. He fell in love with the power that he was blessed with in the UFC. And out of Josh Emmett's last 9 fights straight, he's scored 7 knockdowns out of those 9 fights. So very impressive stuff. He's one of the most powerful guys at the featherweight weight class. And he's coming off of the round 2 submission loss at the hands of Yair Rodrigues earlier this year in, I believe it was February or March. He ate some body strikes early. He did have Yair Rodrigues in all sorts of trouble when he was hurt. It just takes one strike at a time for Josh Emmett to either land that left or right hook, a big uppercut, or the big jumping right cross. And, you're going to be on wobbly legs and at the risk of getting knocked out. So that almost happened to Yair Rodrigues, but he showed resolve, and he eventually got a triangle choke on Josh Emmett after stunning him in round 2. That was the first submission loss for Josh Emmett and the first UFC submission win for Yair Rodrigues. Ilia Topuria could maybe have some of that same success with the grappling, since that's what he's the best at. A very high-level grappler coming from a Greco-Roman wrestling base as a kid. Translates that into getting the fight to the mat where he wants it, and he's got all sorts of submissions, high-level BJJ black belt. And now he's got power in his strikes as well, knocking out guys like Damon Jackson, ground strikes against Ryan Hall, knocking him out cold. Making Jai Herbert taste the canvas with a left hook to the body, a right hook up top in round 2 of their fight after some early adversity, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But he also just set up his finish with Bryce Mitchell in December, a grappler versus grappler matchup where Ilia Topuria, showed that he's the more dominant grappler by far, better gas tank, and he used his striking weapons to set up that arm triangle choke. I think it was like an uppercut, left hook, right hook, wobbled Bryce Mitchell, put him almost unconscious, and then it wasn't long after that he took the fight to the mat, and Ilia Topuria got a very easy arm triangle on him in round 2. So a 12-year age advantage in the favor of the 26-year-old Topuria. Far less fight miles, a lot more momentum, a guy who still is hungry enough to go and chase the upper echelon of this division, whereas Josh Emmett just lost. He finally got the title shot he wanted, the interim belt, the big moment, and he lost it by way of finish. You got to give Josh Emmett the power advantage. I'll give him the striking advantage for sure. He's got the experience and the better resume, the better fighters faced by far, and he's got the 5 rounds experience as well. He went all 5 rounds with Calvin Kattar in their fights, and he came out the victor of that very close decision result. And it was because of the optics. He was striking and advancing and being the aggressor at all points of the fight against Kattar. I think Ilia Topuria should be able to play the wrestling game very early in this fight. Hopefully he doesn't stand and strike with Josh Emmett for more than a minute or two before he can level change and find the right read to get the takedown. And then I think he can wear out Josh Emmett's gas tank by making him struggle to defend submissions, struggle to get back to his feet, rinse and repeat takedowns on Josh Emmett, and then he'll be far less dangerous as this fight goes on. But Ilia Topuria being a minus 310 favorite over the plus 260 Josh Emmett, it's a pretty wide money line. You're really paying for that 13-0 shiny undefeated record for Topuria. You're paying for all of his potential that we have not seen yet. If there's one critique I have on Ilia Topuria, for one, he's fought a lot of fellow grapplers so far in the UFC. Yusuf Zalal in his debut went to decision with them. Obviously, he was dominant, but that was probably the worst we've ever seen Ilia Topuria as far as his gas tank. Did look like it was pretty well zapped in round 3, but he did work through it and finish strong. But yeah, Damon Jackson, fellow grappler, knocked him out. Ryan Hall, trying to play jiu-jitsu the whole time, got ground and pounded out. Jai Herbert, that's a striker, and that's the guy who gave him his biggest test to date. I know these featherweight fights have a way of sneaking over more than not, but Josh Emmett, if he's going to get this done, probably going to be by knockout and probably under 2.5 rounds. If Ilia Topuria gets this done inside the distance, with all of his ground control time he would have to win this fight, I just think that he finds a submission or a ground and pound stoppage at some point before round 4 starts. So yeah, give me Ilia Topuria to win. I'll call it by round 3 submission. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All the fights broken down for UFC Fight Night Jacksonville, UFC on ABC 5. And speaking of being on ABC, I believe this is not even a fight night card. This is a fight day card here in the States. I think it starts around noon or maybe late morning on Saturday. So I might actually have to miss some of this card. Got some stuff going on the weekend, but I'll certainly keep tabs as to what the results are. There's a lot of really fun fights that are almost guaranteed not to see the judges' scorecards, as we talked about in the breakdown. So I'll be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Time for my live stream, talking fights with you guys in the chat and my Chronic Combat boys, trying to find ways to make money on this card this weekend. I'll be back at the end of the week for the best bets and props, laying out all of my betting action personally and all of the recommended plays for the week as well. So after dropping about 1.77 units of profit last weekend, there were some fights that fell off. The Zalgas fight fell off. I had action on. The Ronnie Lawrence fight was a no contest. And it was just that bad bet on Christian Leroy Duncan that eventually cost me the difference there. But going to bounce back, try to win some profit this week. So hit the like, hit the subscribe. Check out the affiliate link to Bet Online, my sportsbook betting partner, in the description. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Cheers.